Investigative reporter Greg Palast joins us today. You know him, obviously, through his investigative reports for BBC TV, The Guardian, Democracy Now!, Rolling Stone, and now here he is on act.tv's Twitchcast. Greg Palast's new book, How Trump Stole 2020, will be out in June, the 2nd of June. The book reveals how Trump's already basically got the November election in the bag. That is, unless we can quickly snatch it back. Greg, thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be with you, Julianna.
Greg, what are the people not aware of in terms of how Trump has already got this thing in the bag?
Well, yeah, well, it's stolen, but we can steal it back. And so,
how is it already stolen? Is it pre-stolen? Okay. How did he do that?
It's pre-stolen. In fact, the first chapter, I'll read you the entire first chapter of the book, which is called The End. And it's Donald Trump won re-election November 2018, 2 years before a single vote was cast. See, what's happened is that's where they began in Georgia, in the race between Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp. The only reason that guy won over the first black woman to ever run for governor in American history was that Brian Kemp removed 340,134 voters from the voter rolls who he said had left the state. None did. And then the floodgates opened up. 17 million people. Well, okay, let me not exaggerate. 16.9 million citizens have been removed from the voter rolls in the last 2 years. That's a big, fat thumb on the scale. That's just one of the ways that the Trumpsters have stolen the election, but we can steal it back. There's a lot of stuff we can do that can change the story.
So Trump has been saying, there's people, the Democrats are basically saying we need to do mail-in voting. And Trump is saying, oh, if mail-in voting happens, a Republican won't ever win. So, but your recent writing has said, no, mail-in voting is not at all secure. And it's a great way to hand the election over to Republicans. Can you talk about what's happening when it comes to mail-in voting?
You know what? I think we're all getting a little kind of Trump crazy because we react to everything he says. So if he says it has to be, we react. He says no mail-in. We say we have to do all mail-in. Here's the thing. When Trump says that mail-ins favor Democrats, believe it or not, Donald Trump sometimes gets his facts wrong. In this case, it's big time gets his facts
really
wrong. So, okay, so here's the numbers. Here's what they don't tell you. According to the U.S. government actually tracks not only our votes, tracks the non-votes. So according to the Elections Assistance Commission, the official U.S. stats, 16.9 million people have been purged from the voter rolls in the last 2 years. On top of it, 512,000 mail-in ballots were rejected. And as I say, if you go to gregpalast.com, you'll see, or Nation of Change, you'll see that I wrote a story on how minority ballots get lost by the millions. So according to the MIT Caltech study, 22%, that's 20 plus 2, 22%, more than a fifth of all mail-in ballots never get counted. And it's not just anyone's ballots. Now think of it, it's 22%. If we go to 80% mail-in voting, we'll have lost 25 million ballots.
I see someone behind you crawling past to get the cat, and I'm sorry that it's too funny that I can't stop laughing. I love it. I have a sofa here. The cat goes by every so often.
The cat did it.
So can you talk just I know there's so much voter fraud going on and votes
not by the voters, but by the fraud upon the voters by voting officials, right?
Right. And that's important to point out because the right always says there's voter fraud, meaning, one Sally Jones is going in 5 times to vote for Obama or whatever. Whereas really it's not that way. But we have a question coming from the chat. Can you explain more specifically how votes are stolen?
Okay, well, if you're looking at mail-in ballots, for example, the post office doesn't tell you that 4 to 20% of the mail sent to the inner city is never delivered. Just never delivered. Part of it is that people move within their buildings. You don't have to re-register if you move within your neighborhood, but if you don't re-register, you are not going to get your ballot. The biggest problem that MIT found was that people don't get their ballots. I mean, they simply don't get them at all, or they don't get them in time to mail them back. That's the number one single problem. Students move their dorm rooms, et cetera. So you basically have this massive democratic demographic. Then there's, the when you look at mail, for example, Wisconsin, about 140,000 ballots were rejected in a couple of weeks ago. Most people don't realize that if you mail in a ballot in Wisconsin, you have to have a witness signature,
Right.
in the lockdown. And in Alabama, where Doug Jones is in a very tight race for fighting to keep the Senate Democratic in this uphill battle, in Alabama, you have to have a notary sign your ballot. You have
Are they even open?
So, well, that's the whole point. So what's happening, you have to have your ballots notarized in 3 states. You have to have witnesses in 6 states. You have postage due. Lost over 100,000 ballots because people don't realize sometimes you have to put 2 stamps on, and little tricks that are used. If
you have to put a stamp, can it just be free?
Well, it depends on what state you're in. So about half the states, it's postage paid, and half the states you have to put on the stamps. And like in Ohio, they put on one little square, so people think it was 1 stamp and it was 2. I mean, it's crazy, stupid stuff. But that's the beginning of it. But the big thing is removing people, what I call purge by postcard, where you send someone a postcard because, oh, they're registered in 2 states. Well, who's registered in 2 states? David Kim, Jose Garcia. By the way, there are 832,000 Garcias in America, according to the census. Jack Johnson, et cetera. So it's the history of slavery, the history of the conquest, immigration, and the Asian American communities, that people have common names. So they send you a postcard. They go, oh, please confirm your address, David Kim, because we see that you're registered in Atlanta and in Detroit. Believe it or not, they found a James Brown in Atlanta and they found a James Brown in Detroit. They obviously
we need a few more James Browns, but
yeah,
I mean,
actually, well, you'll see in my book how Trump stole 2020. Georgia alone removed 538 guys named James Brown, saying that they voted in other states.
Wow.
And by the way, the middle names didn't match. It was like James Edward Brown. It was supposed to be James Thomas Brown. James Brown Sr. was supposed to be James Brown Jr. So this is what they're doing. And they send you a postcard. If you don't get this piece of junk mail and respond to it, you lose your vote. So by the way, one thing, anyone watching, I can give you one personal bit of advice. While you're talking to me now, check your registration. Every state, Secretary of State will allow you to check it out. Most states allow you to register online. 17 million people have just been erased. It could be you. Everyone that I met that was erased was shocked that they couldn't vote.
I was erased once when I wanted to vote for Bernie. I think they knew I was coming to vote for Bernie, and
well, if you're in Brooklyn,
yeah, that was it. Greg, can you talk about given the new pandemic and where we may or may not be in the fall in terms of social distancing, what do you think is the best way to guard against Republicans stealing the election? I mean, what do you think is the best way to vote? What do we do?
Several things. When I wrote the book Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, I said rule number 1: don't go postal, never mail in a ballot, because 1 in 5 don't get counted. So, but now we may have to. It's not a question of whether we have a choice. So we're going to have to make sure that we follow try to change the insane rules for mail-in voting. And usually that means, by the way, you're going to have to ask for a ballot, something simple. If it's not mailed to you, you can't mail it back. And, how to fill it out. I'm going to start making some films about this. But also what we have to do is guard against the fact that you have millions of people targeted for removal. And in some states, for example, like Wisconsin's the swing state of swing states. And the GOP legislature passed a law that not only requires students to have, ID to vote, people have to have a photo ID to vote, but new voters, meaning like mostly students, have to mail in a photocopy of their ID with the ballot, with the witness signature. You can see what's going to happen here, right? And you'll love this one. You have 182,000 students at the University of Wisconsin they all have state photo IDs, and you need a state photo ID to vote. However, the University of Wisconsin state photo ID can't be used for voting. If you have a concealed carry gun permit, you can use that for voting, but not the university. What you'd have to do is
wow. So you can be a gun guy, but not a student, and you can vote with your
guns, not bullets, not books. But you can get you can, if you're a student, go in and get a new photo ID from the dean of students at the University of Wisconsin.
So responsive. So how many students go to the University of Wisconsin? There will be a huge line at the dean's office.
There's 182,000.
They're not going to be able to obviously give those. I mean, this is just insane.
Closed. It's closed.
Oh yeah, right.
So
There's that too.
Scattered. So this is the game that. So in the number one swing state, you're blocking students from voting. Who doesn't have an ID, who doesn't have a driver's license? Guess what? People without cars. For the you know it, and that tends to be urban people, low income people. In other words, black. Brown.
How do they know when you're sending in your? I mean, this might be just a very, very kind of I don't know. Just a simple question, but how do they know when you mail in a vote that you are a black person? It doesn't say race, right? Or do they just guess based on who you're voting for? Like, how do they know to get rid of you?
There's two things. First of all, as I said, the big problem in low income areas is that they don't get the ballot in the first place. So they get a piece of junk. First, remember, a mail-in ballot is two mail-ins. First, you have to mail in a card. You have to look for a card, mail in the card that says, I want a mail-in ballot. So that's two pieces of mail that can be missed. And in the inner city, that's what happens, and people move around. So, but then also,
I think you made a good point. You made a good point in your article saying that the person in the $1 million home has lived there for 15 years. So the address is the same, but people who are marginalized often have to move quite a bit, which makes sense given the fact that we just had tenants' rights organizers on right before you talking about how these landlords are unscrupulous and people are being forced to move out of their homes even during a pandemic.
But they definitely know. First of all, it's just like precincts. Your zip code says who you are. Your address says who you are. Remember, it's not, first of all, remember, this is no longer a secret ballot when you're mailing it in. You have to have the signature usually in sometimes 2 or 3 places besides the witness signatures and all that stuff. So they know who you are and they know which ballots to challenge. And so you also have a lot of ballots, what they say are residual or spoiled. What that means is that you put a wrong mark on an extra mark, or they usually have a little circle that you got to fill in the bubble. And if you put
hanging chads, I remember.
If you lose those on, actually there are hanging chads on some some states use mail-in punch cards. So you have the same problem, filling in the little bubbles. And see, so if they want to knock you out, and they do, if they want to cut out the number of votes. So altogether, for example, we have a couple million in America, what we call residual votes, which is a fancy term for ballots that people have cast but don't get counted. And the chance your ballot will not be counted is 900% higher if you're black than if you're white. So it's not random. That's how they do it.
Greg, we may have gone slightly off here, but what do we do? I think I asked. I mean, if you're not allowed to stand in line, what do we demand?
Okay, well, first of all, we do demand change the system, but we're going to have to take care of our ballot even if they don't. And that's why I say, we have to literally learn how to fill out the ballots and request for ballots and the envelopes, etc. For example, in Ohio, you have a space that says put in your driver's license number. If you don't have a driver's license number, you leave it blank, you'll lose your vote. You have to write no driver's license. We have to train people how to do this stuff. Now, should we change these systems so they don't shaft people out of their vote? Yeah, I think we should do that, but I'm not holding my breath. I've seen, you've had Senator Wyden of Oregon, Amy Klobuchar, and Kamala Harris, they all have ideas of how to make mail-in voting easier. Well, number one, like prepaid postage, or two, mail everyone a ballot.
That helps.
That would help, so you don't have to request the ballot. Simple things. But that, but it's, on the other hand, they have to say, Mitch McConnell, may I? And so it's not going to work.
Greg, at what percentage would Democrats have to vote in order to overcome the voting disproprieties we're seing here?
55%. You got a very exact number, didn't you? Well, okay. So what I did was in How Trump Stole 2020, I start out, I tell you in the book, actually, with very exact numbers, all of the different ways you'd steal the vote. I used to be a statistician, believe it or not.
Really?
And so I give you some of the numbers. So it was about 7.9 million votes lost in 2016. 7.9 million. They were not all Democrats by any means, but so you have to say that, and they were concentrated in swing states like Wisconsin and Michigan, et cetera. So, so you have to win, you're going to have to win by 53 to 55%. That's the only way to win if Democrats want to win. I'm not saying that the Democrats should win. Maybe they don't deserve to. I'm a journalist. It's not my job, but I can tell you that the steal is about 7.9 million votes.
And the steal is, the steal favors Republicans, is what you're saying.
Oh, overwhelmingly, because it tends to be aimed at two groups: racial, and the new group that's targeted are the young. These new lists, for example, in
God forbid you get some Bernie supporters out there voting. That would be terrible.
Well, that's the other thing, is that I have a chapter in How Trump Stole 2020 called "Don't Steal Your Own Vote." I mean, here's the problem, guys. Let's talk. Let's just talk, you and me. We're not going to let anyone else hear this.
No.
If you don't vote, okay. If you don't vote, you've handed away your vote. Okay, it's that simple. So please don't.
Yeah, the Bernie, we're talking about people who are saying, because I don't like Joe Biden and I'm not enthusiastic about his person or his platform, that I'm not going to vote because I liked Bernie. That's who you're talking to right now.
Well, or anyone who's decided to by the way, the number one protest vote of 2016 was Gary Johnson. He racked up about 4 million votes, about 5 times as much as Jill Stein picked up. And but in Wisconsin, Trump supposedly won by 22,000 votes. They're trying to remove 250,000 people who they said have left the state or left their county. And one of the people that they included in the purge list was Sequana Taylor. Now, Sequana Taylor, they said, had moved out of Milwaukee. She's an African-American woman, but I don't think that she did, because she's the county supervisor of Milwaukee. But this is the type of people, this is what they're doing to win this election.
Just better get that. That's important.
Sorry, our daughter has died.
Oh, that's terrible.
No,
we just saw her crawl by with the cat.
No, they get harassed by the schools every morning. They're wondering where, it's really quite ridiculous.
Greg, how do we keep, so you report on what's happening. You've been reporting for years on electoral fraud, right? Now we have mail-in fraud. We've had the interstate cross-check we were talking about. We have the electronic voting machines owned by Diebold, who are in bed with the Cheneys. I can't remember. It's also, no paper trail. We've got closing of voting places, so the lines are long. Closing of polling places, so so that the only places you can go and vote are in they're inaccessible to people. You've got making it, you have to vote on that one day, so you can't do the souls to the polls thing they were doing. I mean, at what percentage of democracy is literally left here? It seems like, and then it's a two-part question: percentage of democracy left, And how do we encourage people to go out and vote when this news that we're reporting is just so demoralizing?
Well, it should be energizing. My God,
feel better.
Really, someone's stealing your, has their hand in your pocket and they're trying to steal your wallet. You don't say, the hell with it. You grab their hand and say, get your hand out of my pocket. So they're stealing your vote. Okay. You notice I don't use the term vote suppression because, Julianna, when someone steals your car, you don't say, my car's been suppressed. No, this is the bullshit term that you hear on National Petroleum Radio. Here's the thing. We absolutely have to make the decision that we are going to overcome the vote thieves. They can't steal all the votes all the time. As I said, you have to win 53 to 55% against the steal. Okay, that's just what you're going to have to do. Too bad. I saw in Mexico.
Well, women feel that way all the time for our whole lives. It's like, oh, if you want to do what a man is doing, you have to do it 20% better in some way. It's not a shock. No offense to you, Greg. You're fabulous.
Yeah, but thank you. Well, you are doing 20% better already. But yeah, so we have to be, like when Martin Luther King crossed the bridge at Selma, and in my last film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, by the way, that's free on Prime these days.
That's great.
Money Can Buy. I went down to Selma and walked across the bridge with with people who were on the original march with King. And, for King to get the Voting Rights Act, the march from Selma to Montgomery, 4 people were murdered in that whole march. So you don't have to, get killed waiting in line to vote. It's going to be, or having to figure out how to fill out the ballot correctly, or having to check your registration. And by the way, that's going to be another disaster because I hate the provisional ballot. I mean, in America, I go around the world, and in democracies, what is a provisional ballot? So these are ballots that they scrub your name off the voter rolls. You show up, and to make sure that you're tranquilized and stop screaming about losing your vote, they hand you this provisional ballot. They say, "Oh, we'll count this."
That's what they gave me when they scrubbed.
We don't count officially. The non-counted provisional ballots is 978,000, just short of 1 million ballots that people fill out, legal voters, because they weren't legal, by the way. When you fill out a provisional ballot, it says you're filling this out, you have the right to vote, and you swear to it under penalty of going to prison, okay? So, but nevertheless, we have 1 million people who lost their vote, none arrested for being illegal voters. These are the horrible things that happen. But you can't even get a provisional ballot if you're mailing in your ballot. If you got a ballot and you then get scrubbed and you mail it in, they throw it out. In some states, now here's the thing. People say, "Oh well," in fact, like my good friend Tom Hartman says, "Oh well, it works well in Oregon." Well, if you live in Portlandia, I think everything works well. Yeah. Washington, Oregon do have mail-in voting, but they don't try to shaft you out of your ballots. I know these secretaries of state, they're the only 2 Republicans that aren't trying to steal your vote. By the way, and just to be kind of bipartisan, there is no one who's stolen more votes from voters in any Secretary of State in America. I've investigated the white supremacists, Chris Kobach, Brian Kemp, of Georgia, all these characters, but no one is as bad as Alex Padilla of California, the Democrat. So no one steals more votes than in any one state than the Democratic Party. So there you go. So I just want to even that up a bit.
Really?
I have a chapter on the theft of the election in 2016 from Bernie, and then he lost 5, as you'll see in the book, How Trump Stole 2020. But the Democratic Party stole 553,000 votes from Bernie Sanders just a month ago. And that's how fresh the book is. The book has the California primary. It has even the virus votes for Trump, a whole thing on voting in a time of virus. So
that's why I was very surprised that it was all written already, because I know you're like it's always the freshest stuff in there. It's not like let's look back at the history books when it's too late to do it.
The publishers hate it because it gives them no time to prepare stuff. But it's very important to me that it be as up to date as I possibly can get it. So the book was just finished. It's out June 2. You can now order it. I'm pushing people to order on, their usual suspects, Amazon, whatever you do. And it's not advertising for me. I don't get any money from the book. I've donated the proceeds to to my foundation, the Palast Investigative Fund. I'm trying to, all my books have been New York Times bestsellers, and I want this to be the same. The simple reason, it puts us in all the locations, it forces them to take note of this book. The mainstream is forced to take notice of a book when it's on the bestseller list. And I promise you, even if you hate the book, you'll love the comic book inside, 48 pages.
Always my favorites. Ted Rall. Oh,
Ted Rall.
I love him. He was on my show a couple of months ago.
Yeah, he's brilliant. We're very lucky to have him because the LA Times fired him for doing cartoons making fun of police brutality. I mean, the lighter side of,
but in the best way,
of beating the crap out of Hispanic kids in Los Angeles. But anyway, so the LA Times fired him. So we lucked out because that gave him some time to do a brilliant comic book inside how Trump stole 2020. And you can always, by the way,
yeah.
I want to.
I was just going to say, if you're watching and you have a question, put it in because we're coming to the end of our time here, and I want to make sure Greg gets the opportunity to answer your questions. So.
Okay, so there's a question coming up, but in the meantime, I want to mention today is the 10th anniversary of the explosion of the Deepwater Horizon. I investigated that, and tonight
10 years, wow.
At 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to do a very quick Facebook Live at Greg Palast Investigates about the real story of the Deepwater Horizon and what they never told you here, but I put at the top of the nightly news on TV in Britain and all throughout Europe and the world, everywhere but here, is that 17 months before the Deepwater Horizon blew up and incinerated 11 people.
And destroyed the Gulf of Mexico.
There was an exact similar blowout in a BP Deepwater well, Transocean, same rig, in the Caspian Sea 17 months before, and they completely covered that up. They not only covered it up they covered up when it happened because that allowed them to drill in the Gulf. That's why they covered it up.
Wow.
So if they hadn't covered it up, they wouldn't have even been drilling there, let alone using the unsafe methods that they used. So I want to bring that up because this is why you vote. Okay, this is why you vote, because that's what's at stake. Not only whether the virus will kill you, you have not only global warming, but the sea poisonings and everything else that happens with fossil fuels before we even get fried.
Greg, if the angels of voting shine upon us and we get a Democratic president and a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House, I'm
nonpartisan. I don't know if the angels are
saying me. I'm saying me. Well, what would so regardless of who's in there, if there's a possibility to pass some sort of legislation at the federal level that would mitigate against all of the vote theft, what would that look like? And what can we push our electeds to do?
Several things. One, stop. No more of these purges of the voter rolls that's supposedly to clean them up and make sure people don't vote twice. Well, we don't have people voting in America twice. It does not happen. Okay. There's been about 4 cases out of 1 billion votes cast in the last decade. You go to jail for 5 years if you vote twice. So let's stop the purges. The games with the purges have got to end. The second thing, we start counting all the ballots. If someone signs a provisional ballot under penalty of law that they will go to prison if they're lying, count that damn ballot. That's the difference between John Kerry having been elected president in 2004 and Bush being returned to office and some kids being returned to their graves in Iraq. So, there's reasons to keep voting. We can change. obviously we should get, again, provisional ballots. The other thing is counting all the ballots, which we don't do in America. And we throw out ballots where, for example, if you mail it in and your quote signature doesn't match, it gets challenged. Well, to me,
or if it goes a little bit outside the box.
Right. So that's 141,000 people lost their lost their mail-in ballots because they didn't like their signature. Well, in Oregon, you actually get a chance to say, yeah, that really is me, and correct your signature, or if you left it off, if you forgot to sign it, because sometimes these ballots have to be signed in 2 or even 3 places. So, look, so we can change these laws so that it makes it easier to vote instead of a damn obstacle course. Absolutely. And one of the things is to stop making it worse. The problem is we keep having more and more states adding more and more rules like current photo ID. So it's insane. So we can change that.
I wonder if we're able to remove the orange fascists from power. I know you're nonpartisan, so that's my words, not yours. If Democrats will take this issue seriously and really do something about it. They seem to have been sitting on it and doing nothing about it for,
forever. Right. Well, actually, I have a chapter in How Trump Stole 2020. Which is called The Silence of the Democratic Lambs. And I ask myself the question that you've asked me, that many people do. Well, if they're stealing all these votes, where's the Democratic Party? And I could give you all kinds of answers, but I don't really know, except to say that we at least have now an exception to that rule. Stacey Abrams, who was the first African-American woman to run for governor anywhere in America. She won the governorship of Georgia, except that she says, I won, but I won't be inaugurated. This was refreshing. She's in the sense of the first Democrat to say, who literally say, because of Jim Crow tactics used in Georgia. And she specifically cited my work at the time for Salon, showing that 340,000 in fact, to be exact, 340,134 voters are removed from the voter rolls for having left their homes, changed their residence. They never moved. I hired Amazon's people to make sure I knew where people were.
Yes.
And so what happens is that she stood up, and that's a very, very different thing. And now everyone's going, oh yeah, oh wow. She's fighting, again, vote suppression, but this is, oops.
I'm still here.
Okay. I'm not. My power.
Oh, your power's going out. Greg, what about automatic registration for voting with income tax?
Oh, absolutely. Let's see.
Done. The whole problem solved.
Well,
with one stroke of a pen.
Okay. Yeah. So, you have to automatically register people, but then at the
he's gone. Oh no, this is the sadness. A great, great sadness. We've been talking to investigative journalist Greg Palast, and we'll see if he is able to rejoin us. I'm not sure. You can follow him on the internets at Greg_Palast, Greg_Palast, or go, watch that thing that he's doing tonight at 7:00. Greg at GregPalast. I believe it's .com. Anyway, Greg is the author of several New York Times bestsellers like Armed Madhouse, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, which, by the way, is a feature film. Hopefully you've seen it. I'm trying to bring him back. If he comes back, that'd be great. But I think his computer just crashed and died. So I'm sorry about that. There was a very abrupt ending to a fabulous interview. And my thought about, the question that I asked him at the end, T-Web 222 says Democrats don't seem to want to win. Isn't that the truth? I think that, if Democrats see the writing on the wall, and if they actually enfranchise all of the people who've been disenfranchised under the Republican Party, we would have a Bernie Sanders. And so Republicans don't necessarily, or Democrats, the corporate Democrats, the Democrats who are in control really probably don't want that either. Jake Napper Tandy in our Twitch chat says the voting thing he is talking about is certainly curious, like the distribution of lost ballots would be very interesting to see, knowing the other data and distribution on other participatory actions. Yes. Anyway, you can go check out more of what Greg does on his website. I'll put it here in the Twitch. Greg Palast was last night. Yeah, there it is. gregpalast.com. He was last night on with Tom Hartman, and you can see that video. He was also on act.tv a couple days ago with Josh Fox. You can see that video cut and put on his own website. I'm not sure he's going to be back. Probably not. Doesn't look like it. But we'll see if he'll come back another day and talk to us again. Keep a look out for his book, which is going to be out June 2nd. The book is How Trump Stole 2020. Oy, I hope he's not right. Thanks for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. And if you're watching on Facebook, thank you very much. Tell other people about our stream. And we'll see you later. Signing off on Facebook. If you want more of me and more of act.tv talking with you all day, come over to Twitch, where we'll be live for quite a long time, at least for me, another hour. And then one of our other fabulous act.tv folks, James, is taking over at noon. So come on over there. Thank you. Goodbye, Facebook. Thanks for watching.